Welcome to the Spiritual AI podcast, where we explore the incredible power of our inner intelligence, which I call spiritual AI. Just like a computer uses AI to process data and find solutions, our awareness and intuition can guide us through life with clarity, ease, and purpose. Each week, we'll dive into the transformative tools, spiritual insights, and practical strategies to help you awaken, amplify, and align with your inner power. I'm your host, your friend, your guide, and your fellow student, Leonie Dutoy. Come and join the awareness and intuition revolution. Welcome back to the Spiritual AI podcast. If this is the first time that you are here with me, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. And if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. On today's podcast, I've got a beautiful soul with me, a friend, fellow expert, healer, guide, coach, however you want to see it, here in Perth with me, Russell Storey. Russell, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Russell is a breathwork expert, facilitator. He is the founder of Connected Breath. Russell is an international breathwork trainer and has worked with conscious breathing for over a decade now. Now, I loved in your bio, you said that you have taught in every continent except Antarctica. My first question is do you have plans to go to the cold country?
We've all got to have a dream, Leonie. We've all got to have a dream.
We've got a dream. That's so beautiful. So, Russell, thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to diving into this conversation today because not just for the audience on the podcast as well, but we also literally in the launch for Sacred Healing, and you're going to be one of the experts that I've brought into Sacred Healing, the 12-week program that I'm running. Mm-hmm. And you're going to facilitate breath work and bring the magic into Sacred Healing as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. Where do we start? Let's ask, who is Russell? Where does Russell come from? Who were you as a young boy? What did you want to be? How did you end up in breath work? So just go for it. It's a big question.
How did I end up teaching people how to breathe? Yeah.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
So a very short bio. I'm from Perth originally. I grew up here. And I went to school in Duncraig and then university down at the University of West Australia. But then I ended up leaving when I was in my early 20s and traveling, going out and seeing the world. And I often joke in my workshops that I went out to put a dent in the world, and the world put a dent in me.
Yeah.
And it brought me back to my professional background is organizational change and project management, these kinds of things. I used to work in big companies over in the UK. Wow. And I've always kind of been fascinated, certainly in my professional years, fascinated with the concept and the idea of change. How do we change as individuals, but also, I say in groups and organizations, how do you actually, make change happen in our, fast and ever changing world? How do you actually work with that and work with the force of change. And my journey was one of burnout. I was relatively successful professionally. And I was, had a succession of promotions and all these kinds of things was one of these people tapped up for more responsibility. But unfortunately, my life was out of balance. And it was really, I guess I could say, a journey of burnout that took me to the doorway of breath and into this whole world of spirituality and experience that I had no idea existed. And it really turned my life on its head. And I went through what was, probably at that point, the biggest change I'd ever been through in my life. I had a relationship that broke down. But it was that relationship that inspired me to get into breath in the first place. I was trying to help my partner at the time, who was experiencing some very severe depression. And I was the support network of one. And being a guy, I was trying to fix the problem, and breathwork arrived through a series of coincidences. I guess if depending on the audience, you can have your own opinion as to whether coincidences are real or not. I'm learning that the synchronous nature of the universe, and for me, it was like there's sometimes the doors in life that we move through and we realize we can't go back. And that was what the experience for me of breath work was. I'd had a background as part of my professional development, working as a change professional, as I say, in financial services. I had a background in NLP and these types of things. I loved being able to disconnect things or deconstruct them intellectually and problem
Yeah.
solve and to come up with plans and formulas and strategies and all these kinds of things. But the journey, as I unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately, but reluctantly had to embark upon, was one that was the journey within, right? And the journey into my own emotional body. And then that, opened the doorway to, I guess I could say, my spiritual path, the path of my life, which has been, building a relationship with my own breath. And like you were saying, it's taken me around the world. I ended up teaching I've been to every continent and met people from all walks of life. And the one thing that unites us is we all breathe,
Yeah.
and it's a foundational building block of life. And to learn and discover, I think I was around 30 the time that I got into this in a serious way. That we can change our lives by changing how we breathe, and that still blows my mind, Leonie. It still blows my mind that, and I get to see it on a regular basis with the clients that I work with and the groups that I lead and the trainings that I run. People are able to, go inside, stay with the process of working with their own inner experience and continue to breathe. That we can transform and evolve in ways that are beyond anything we can really even imagine, to be honest. And
Yeah.
yeah, I know breathwork's kind of enjoying a little bit of it. It's time in the sun at the moment. It's people talk about it quite, yeah, like quite frequently now, compared to 15 years ago when I started,
Yeah.
and people are like, you're teaching people what? Like, this is ridiculous. And
Yeah.
now, as
Yeah.
it's moving its way into the mainstream. People are starting to develop an appreciation for just how powerful their breath can be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting how, the more of these conversations I have, the more I talk with people, I realize that so many of us have, from a young age or from an early stage in our life, we all had this deep desire to know more about the human, to dive
Mm,
deeper, to understand better. And
mm,
then life happens in beautiful ways, and synchronicities happen, and it's not always the easy stuff that happens, but it happens in order to kind of to get us out of that state, out of the relationships, out of the job that we don't like, out of that circumstances, and then it kind of forces us
yes.
to to look at ourselves, right? It's
Mm,
looking inside, and then it
mm,
takes us on this beautiful journey of discovery. And then this is where I've got chills. This is where we find our magic, right? This is where
yeah.
we dive into the discovery of the capacity of what humans are capable of,
Mm,
capable of, and then that inner journey, the layers of the onions, right? And when we're talking about breath work, is you can do breath work on a daily basis, and every day you'll peel back a little bit
mm,
more of what's there. And
mm,
yeah, and breath work is really powerful. So I actually I had a beautiful client the other day, and before I did a healing with her, a frequency alignment with her, I asked her to take a few nice deep breaths, and I was drawn to keep my eyes open while she was breathing, and you could see her shoulders do this, and I was like, no, no, honey, put your hands on your stomach.
mm,
Now breathe down, and it was really hard for her to
mm,
breathe all the way down. Like it was like she was learning to ride a bicycle, like there was, or riding a car, driving a car, like it's hands and feet and everything. And it was like this, and you could see, and I really became aware in that moment that there is still a lot of people out there that actually don't know how to breathe, even though
mm,
they breathe. It's like,
mm.
like you were saying, you teach people what?
Yeah.
But people don't actually know how to breathe full capacity to
Mm,
bring in enough oxygen into their body. So why don't you kind of, I think we need to start there and just describe a little bit of, breathing up here, and then what's the proper
mm,
way of breathing, and how can people start doing this for themselves?
mm. Okay, so when I'm teaching people breath work, I tend to share the breath operates on 3 different levels of experience. We've got the
Yeah.
physical level, the mental emotional level, and then the spiritual level.
Mm.
And a bit like those Russian babushka dolls, the spiritual contains it all, and then we're kind of reduced down into the physical.
Mm.
But we open, when it comes to working with our breath, I teach opening our breath. And so to do that, we want to be breathing correctly. So from the physical level, exactly as you say, when we can observe how people are breathing, quite often they can be breathing like very inefficiently up in their chest.
Mm.
But this can have impacts on all levels of their being. So it's not just the physical side that's inefficient, and
Yeah.
so they're putting their body under undue stress. I often, joke in my, or maybe not joke, but tell people in my workshops, if we breathe, we feel. And so one of the reasons why we're not breathing correctly in the first place is because if we were to breathe correctly, it's going to perhaps trigger us emotionally or take us into spaces or experiences that we don't necessarily want to feel. And so it can be a re or deconditioning process, because we can pick up this stuff along the way of the journey of our lives. We go from sort of being this size, infants in our mother's arms, where all our needs are taken care of, and then we move from here to here to here, and this process of socialization, we're interacting in the world, and we're learning that the world doesn't necessarily respond to our needs, and sometimes that's painful. And one of the ways of allowing ourselves to socialize and I guess grow and develop into adults, as we need to learn how to regulate our emotional state. And so if we
Mm.
go from being, as I say, toddlers into pre-adolescence into adolescence and the like, learning to work with our emotional body is again something that we're not taught how to do, but we all unconsciously have to do it.
Mm.
And so one of the easiest ways for us to regulate our emotional state is to hold our breath. And so we
Mm.
can develop these, we call them in the breathwork trade holding patterns. So the example of your client of breathing in the chest, the chest in breathwork can be connected to love and feeling and emotion, these types of things. And
Yeah.
so it's a holding pattern of, oh, there's something that I'm feeling that I don't want
Mm.
to fully feel, or I can't let go of. And as anyone on the spiritual path knows, the journey into our emotions is a messy one, and it can be really uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
it takes a lot of courage to really go within. So the first thing I'm looking for when I'm working with someone is the physical mechanics of how they're breathing. And so from going back to a physical level, an efficient, or the most efficient way to breathe is to be using the diaphragm, which is the big muscle at the base of our ribs. When we breathe in,
Yeah.
it goes down, we create space for the air to move in. And so we're expanding ourselves on the inhale. If we're breathing with our chest, we're actually using the wrong muscles. We're using the intercostal muscles in between our ribs. And so they're actually designed for the exhale. If we have how you could say, an aligned exhale, it doesn't require any effort. It's just, we just let go.
Yeah.
And so it's
There's let go,
expand
right?
and then
Yeah.
and relax. And so it's this restorative
Mm.
process that we're really going through from a physical level of reconnecting into our instinctive, processes, which is the most primal one is to breathe. It's the first thing we do when we enter this world. We
Yeah.
take our first breath, and that's what stays with us all the way through until we take our last breath. It's our breath is kind of our guide through life. And so yeah, so if we're able to get the physical elements of the breath operating efficiently, then, as I say, we start to work with what's actually going on underneath and some of the reasons why our breath closes down. But then if we can continue to breathe and work through that stuff, and that's the magic of breath work, is if we're able to relax into the intensity of the experience, whatever's coming up for us, if we can accept it and continue to breathe, then we experience something that I label as integration. And
Mm.
and that's really the work of breath work, of working through old memories and difficult things that have happened in our lives. And so
Mm.
we open up physically, but then we start to open up mentally and emotionally too. We can clear out old baggage. We can clear out the trauma that all of us accumulate along the way. Growing up, you're asking me about my background growing up here in Perth. Going to school was contact sport, and being a guy, it's pretty ruthless as far as, your emotional body and learning to, handle your emotions in a I guess in a healthy way, and not repressing them or channeling them into unhealthy things.
Yeah.
But if we can work with our breath, then the most wonderful thing about it is we don't have to talk about what's going on inside us. We don't have to talk about our experience. We can
Mm.
just breathe and feel. And if we can feel, then we can integrate. And if we can integrate, it sets us free. And
Yeah.
so getting the body open from a physical side of things, getting as I say, the diaphragm working. We want to be nice and relaxed. As you're saying, we don't want to be breathing with our shoulders, because again, we're using the incorrect muscles for breathing. If you've
Yeah.
ever watched a healthy baby breathe, their whole body expands.
It's that stomach. It's that
Yeah,
little
and
stomach, that
it is,
ball.
and it's
Yeah.
and obviously, we grow, and we grow from being here to standing upright and the like. But it's the core process of allowing life to flow through us, which is what we're really restoring as part of breathwork practices. And then if we can persist with the practice, then that's when it opens us up to spiritual states of consciousness and all these kinds of amazing things that we can access through our breath. So
Yeah.
it really is a holistic process, as I say, all levels of our being, and we're really opening up on all levels of our being.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I want to touch on there, and the one is the one that's stuck in my mind now is as a female, I when I first, I can't remember if it was in a yoga class or if it was with breath work, but when I first had to kind of rediscover the whole breathing,
Mm,
how to breathe properly, breathe with the belly, there was this, like, if somebody tells you as a woman, and I'm assuming as a man as well, to tells you to kind of expand your belly, like
mm,
release the muscles and just let your gut go, like
yeah,
relax. And then you
yeah,
take that breath and your stomach is out there and you just like, you become very conscious. So I remember my first time, I was like, you saying what? I'm holding the stomach in.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So it just that on that level, holding it in, we're walking with all these tense muscles, and we don't realize that that impacts our breathing, and then it impacts our entire
everything.
being.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything. It's
Yeah.
and that's a great example of the holding patterns that I was talking about.
Yeah.
These conditioning, you know, patterns that we adopt for whatever reason. Whatever, we're worried about what people are going to think about us, or
Yeah.
the comments that were made as children that have stayed with us, and they become sort of the guardrails within which we live our lives.
Yeah.
And if we can relax into just I guess I describe it in breathwork groups where we're kind of relaxing into the present moment. We're in a safe environment where everything is welcome. Giving people permission to let it all hang out and just
To
relax.
let it, yeah, and it's also about acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Accepting yourself for who you are, and
Yeah.
that's what your body is. And
Yes.
breathing, if it means that your belly sticks out a little bit further when you're breathing, at least you're oxygenating your body. At least it
Totally.
is part of that healing journey, right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's when you start looking at these things, and this is the other thing that I was going to mention is, when we talk about the layers, and when you start doing the breathing, and then you realize that once you start breathing properly, it opens it up, and then you've got the emotions that you need to regulate. And then
Mm,
this is where things like the nervous system regulation would come in as well with the breath, and
mm,
then the journaling, and then the reframing the mindset, right? And then
yes.
doing the inner child work.
Yes.
This is then how you, like, it fits together.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be one practice that's going to
Yeah.
see you through. You have to
Exactly.
integrate on all these different levels, and then it's like a tool bag. One day
Yeah.
you need this, and the next day you need this. When you do the breath work today, you might need, really deep breathing. Tomorrow you need, or today, fast and slow and deep breaths today to regulate in some way. And then tomorrow you need to sit down and you need to really amp up the breathing because you need to shift something really, like, that's
Yeah.
really deeply rooted. So I don't know if you can dive into that a little bit, like the different
Yeah.
ways of breathing, so that we can kind of just share with the audience
Sure. Sure. So
what
I
what
tend to
type.
describe breath work to people. It's a spectrum. So the breath work that I teach in private sessions and one-to-ones and trainings and the like is the deep integrative work, which as I say has got this restorative quality. We're getting the body open. We're processing things emotionally, and we can access these spiritual states of consciousness. But the other end of the spectrum, I describe that as tactical breath work. So that's a set of skills that you have that you can use in any moment. Exactly as you're saying, if I need to improve my concentration, I can utilize box breathing, which is just breathing in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And doing, simple exercises for a couple of minutes can totally change our state. And so that's really where breath work, for me, it ticks a lot of boxes because it gives us those in the moment tools to be able to regulate what's going on for us in our experience. But the more we can excavate and remove and clear out during our integrated sessions or integrative breathwork sessions, it creates more space for us to then create within. But it's, as I was saying at the beginning, it's a tool that we've got with us all the time. We can change our breathing in any moment. And the real key is to become aware of that fact and knowing that you can do it. Because on one level, breath work is so simple. Anyone who tells you that it's complicated is, not telling you the full story. It really is, the most basic of practices. But it's all encompassing, which is what's so amazing about it. Because as you're saying, we're working directly with our own nervous system. A lot of people don't realize that our nervous system is a two-way street. It's a feedback loop. And so we're able to sort of short circuit that loop by changing how we breathe, because our breath is connected to our primal survival instincts. It's regulated through our central nervous system. We've got our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous systems that they serve complementary but different purposes. And we can access those, as I say, through our breathing. So if we want to boost our energy, we can breathe sharply through our nose, like we find our energy, really lifting. Whereas if we want to relax in the moment, we can.
Yeah.
And a long, slow exhale is going to be, activating a different set of nerves in our bodies. And so when we start to encounter breath, and this is what I'm hoping to share with your guys when I have my session in April, is that really is the path. It's the tool that you can take with you in all situations, in all circumstances. And it's not just, seeking these, intense transformational experiences, which are, can be thrilling and exhilarating and all these kinds of things. It's actually then how do we embody those experiences into our day-to-day life to improve the overall quality of our life experience.
Yeah.
And, so I describe it to people. It's a bit like, we can say, at one end we have our changing our state in the moment if we want to be different. But then we can, at the other end, we can change the structures of our experience, the deeper psychological structures of our experience. And then as you're talking about, opening up to the spiritual side of life. And a lot of people, there's some, very similar themes that I see when people encounter breath work. Their diets tend to improve. They become more aware of what they're putting in their body. Their body awareness improves. And like you were saying with your client, their conscious experience is going to be up here. And so actually moving down into the body, into the present moment, that's quite a journey. You know what I mean? It's not, and it's not something that we do all in a one-er, because, as you were saying, this can literally be a life, these are lifelong patterns. Some of them we can pick up at very, very early stages of our developmental path. And, we're learning our emotions okay, or are they not okay? Is it safe to express, or is it not? Do I have to hold them back, or can I let them go? Or, these kinds of decisions that then go from conscious decisions of a child into the unconscious programming, which can then drive our lives from behind the scenes. And so breathwork can come in and do some of that excavation, can clear out some of that stuff, and it can liberate us from the patterns of the past. But then we need the skills and tools to be able to maintain that state and work with, the inherent complexity of modern life. Like life doesn't happen in workshops. We can have these transformational experiences, but then it becomes, what do we do in our day-to-day, life, and what choices are we making to enable us to, remain functioning at the state or the level that we want to be functioning.
Yeah, it's interesting because like when you go and do the work, when you go on and do the breath work, like a 2-hour breathwork session, or you go on a weekend retreat, the work is not really there. The work is when you come home, when
Absolutely.
when you then come back to reality. That's
Yes.
when the work starts. That's when you need to take those tools that you learned on the weekend, or the
Yes.
experience that you had in that 2-hour session. You need to take that and bring it into your day, because that's where the magic will happen for you.
Yes. Absolutely.
So yeah, people need to remember that. The other thing is that as you were talking, and you were talking about the sharp breath in through the nose, I was reminded that a lot of these breaths, a lot of the types of breathing is almost inherent in us, because if you think back at a child that's crying, that's sobbing, when they start coming down and they start regulating, they often do this
Mm,
That's them regulating, that's
yeah,
them using their breath. And it is
yeah,
an innate ability that we have.
totally,
So
totally.
even as adults, if you feel like you are like just wired and you need to regulate and come down, or something has stressed you out, you can actually use that breath, that
Yeah,
sharp in 2, 3 times through the nose and then long exhale, and that will just bring you down. So
yeah.
there's so much power in the breath.
And that's part of it. Then is that we're bringing consciousness to a lot of things that we already know how to do. You know, as you're saying, we all know how to breathe, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be alive. But
Yeah.
this is really about creating choice, and it's a little bit of a pattern interrupt by, recognizing that we're doing things unconsciously anyway. And
Mm.
if we can bring consciousness to the things that we're doing unconsciously, then that creates choice and that creates freedom. And
Yeah.
it's those moments, and I know it even in myself after all these years working with the breath. I still have moments where I lose my cool and I find myself dysregulated, or life
Oh
happens.
yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
remembering to do it. It's the remembering that you've got the skills. It's remembering, and
Mm.
as you know, like that's one of the, how could you say, the backhanded reward of the spiritual path. Is the more you learn, the greater the tests come, because that's life's way of shaping us and helping us become who we're meant to be. We're going to be encountering resistance along the way. It doesn't. This isn't like a magic bullet that suddenly, well, everything in my life is automatically perfect. There's always things to learn. There's always things to grow from and through. But it becomes, this amazing tool to be able to help us take some big steps. We can take these
Yeah.
bigger steps, but as we take the bigger steps, we're faced with bigger challenges and opportunities to use what we've learned. And I think that's very similar to, you could generalize that out to the spiritual path, as I say, in general,
Yeah.
of a lot of
It's
people have this impression of spirituality being about light and love and rainbows and all these kinds of things. And
no, it can
anyone
be.
who has really walked it authentically will tell you that it's the opposite of that. And it can take you to the edge of your sanity. It can challenge you in ways that you never knew you could be challenged. But ultimately, it's building trust that we're part of something bigger and that we're being guided. And that's really been my journey, through the breath, is these bigger and bigger steps of trust and faith, remembering what I've seen, remembering what I've experienced, but then, exactly as you say, how do you put that into real life, and how do you utilize these skills when they really matter? Because otherwise, it's just fun and games, and to really embody, that spiritual path, it's a courageous thing to do. And I've certainly had times where I've looked back, and I certainly, in the main, I think I wouldn't swap it for the world. But there's certainly been times along the journey where I've thought, it's a bit like Neo in the Matrix, right? You're like, maybe I should have taken the blue pill. But then we
Yeah,
remember,
but then
and we're rewarded if we're able to stay with the experience and move
yeah,
through complex emotional stuff, and we're able to show up in, increasingly, powerful and effective ways. The rewards are beyond anything we could ever imagine, but it requires an
yeah,
element of trust and faith, not just ourselves, but also the skills that we've developed.
yeah.
Um,
And it's the same with all the tools, whether it's breath work or nervous system regulation or whatever it is. When I talk to my clients and my students, awareness, the more awareness you bring into your life, the more it becomes a part of your life, the easier it becomes. So even if that challenge becomes bigger, it
yes,
becomes easier to process it, and the
yes,
time that it takes you to process it becomes shorter. So these
totally,
tools
totally.
are there to support us get through it faster, but it's never going to stop. The
Yes,
challenges are always going to keep coming, because
yeah,
let's face it, Earth is one of the hardest schools there
mm,
is. If you are understanding it at that level, but the challenges are always going to keep coming, because you're not one person living on the earth. You've got relationships, there's jobs, there's clients, there's business, there's whatever it is, and kids and family and partners. So it's always going to be there. It's just when you use those tools, it becomes easier. It's like
yes,
building a house with just your two bare hands and building your house with tools. There's a
mhm,
difference. One is going to be easier than, bare hands. So,
absolutely.
and it's the same with spiritual, whether it's
Yes.
breath work or awareness or whatever it is that we use. So, yeah, it's really powerful.
And I think, just building on that, I think that's part of why it can be so powerful to work with somebody who's maybe walked a few steps ahead on the path before you in the early stages.
Yeah.
Because, we can be moving through big stuff early on. We're moving through some of these patterns, as I say, that have, we've had our entire lives, and they can smash us into new realities. We can have experiences that we might not necessarily be able to understand or explain or rationalize for ourselves.
Mm.
And so it's why, spiritual community, but also, working with people with a little bit more experience can be so powerful, because it's about learning new skills, and the best way to learn new skills. And like you were saying at the beginning, part of my journey around the world was, going and learning from people who knew more than I did. There's people who'd been working with the breath for decades before I'd even heard of it.
Yeah.
And so the best way to learn in my experience is go and learn from people who have done it
Mm.
before you, and learn from them. And then we get the excitement of being able to integrate it into our own lives, and show up in our own way. But to really, accelerate that process, I think, working with people who can, really, be a catalyst for that
Mm.
transformational journey and help you through some of the big chunks early on. And
Mm.
then it becomes, as you say, the process of refinement, and how do I then sort of make the decisions that take my life in maybe a whole new direction.
Yeah. That's really powerful because the image that comes to mind is, people who, you've got two people climbing a mountain, and the person who is ahead of the person who is, behind, they've already taken 2 or 3 steps ahead. They
Yeah.
know which rocks are loose. They can
Yes.
turn around and say, watch that step, watch that step. So
Totally.
that's what, and this is the aim and the reason why I've created Sacred Healing is
Mm,
that we've gone through so much of the stuff. And it's
mm,
not necessarily that, you know, for some people, we are the experts, right? So I'm very careful with labels, but
mm,
as an understanding is that we've climbed the mountain. We can
mm,
turn around and say, if you step left there and you step right there, it's going to take you 10 times faster to get up the mountain. And that's what this program is all about. And even just one-on-one with clients is we can support them. We've gone through that journey. We can give them shortcuts. We can
mm.
give them the tools that is really going to help them go through the process in maybe, a week or a year, instead of 10 years like we
Totally.
had to do.
One of
So
the Sorry, I was going to say one of the best
yeah,
expressions
go
I've
for it.
heard is, people describing it as being the lead student.
That's
You know,
it.
I'm still very much a student of life. And whilst I've learned a lot of things, I'm by no means the finished article. I don't have all the answers, but
Yeah.
exactly as you say, I've also tripped over a few loose rocks, and I've had some things happen along the way that I've learned from. And part of the
Yeah.
reward that comes from the path is actually being able to share that with other people and say, hey, here's what I learned. It's up to you, but to save you
Mm.
repeating, I don't want to rob you of the necessary learning that you have to go through yourself. Sometimes, we can make things too easy for people, and so they miss some of the learning. But in the main, it's having that attitude of openness and humility that, we're dealing with. I say, when we're dealing with spirituality, we're dealing with the infinite, right? We're dealing with everything,
Yeah.
and it's beyond any of us to be able to, distill that into, a definitive version of the truth, and a definitive version of reality.
Mm.
But I believe that a lot of the people that I encounter through breath work are the people who are willing to take responsibility for their inner lives. They're the people who are willing
Oh,
to,
yes.
take the steps into what's uncomfortable for whatever reason. Maybe they're sick of the discomfort, or maybe they're curious. But I find, being in a space where everyone's contribution is welcome, because there's always something to learn from everybody, regardless of, what
Yep.
stage of the learning they're at too. And
100%.
and so for me, that's part of the new paradigm of the types of things that you're birthing here, of bringing people into that fold where we can understand on a how would you say, on a moment to moment basis, our felt connection with everything. We
Yeah.
understand it's not just, these aren't just, platitudes and spiritual BS. They're real experiences that we can
Yeah.
integrate into our lives, and that can really, help us in practical and meaningful ways.
Yeah. 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 So, th- on the, going back to like the expert,
Mhm.
the master knows to always be open because they know they can always learn.
Mm,
So I, as a practitioner, I do believe that I'm an expert in my field, as
mm,
I believe you are an expert in your field.
mm,
I know that every client that comes to me, every opportunity or every opportunity that's presented to me is a mirror for me. There's something for
Mm,
me to listen and quite often for me to learn. And quite often when I'm having conversations with clients, I would be channeling energy and I would be aware of what I'm speaking, and I'll be aware that I'm speaking to myself
mm,
while I'm in a session with my clients. So having that awareness and knowing that, being open on whatever level you are at, whether you consider yourself a master, whether you consider yourself wherever you consider yourself, knowing
mm,
that you are always a student. There's
mm,
always something to learn. So, yeah, so I remind myself often to stay humble and stay
mm,
open and know that there's a reflection in every part of my life.
totally, totally. And I think
Yeah.
that, there's something primal about learning as well. It's kind of what people, it's kind of what brought us this far is our ability to learn
Yeah.
and to remain open. And that's, something that, again, that I've seen when people open themselves up through the breath, that attitude of openness and, for me, learning is school and social conditioning aside, it's an exhilarating experience to be opened up to something new and to be
Yeah.
working with, new things that we can then we can then integrate and utilize as we choose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it starts with that attitude and, as you say, of approaching these things with humility. And I do that with every breathing session that I guide somebody through. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen for them. And
Yeah.
I've got
True.
no idea what's happened after the session other than what they communicate through me. As I was saying earlier, that's one of the wonderful things about the breath. We're able to transform ourselves within the privacy of our own experience. Even the person facilitating you doesn't know what's happening inside you.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a powerful environment to be able to create for people. And a lot of people have never felt that before, or never been in that kind of environment of, unconditional acceptance and teaching people, as you were the same. The journey of self-acceptance, in accepting ourselves, we give permission for other people to do the same. And
Yeah.
when I'm guiding people through what is, to the person on the street, a little bit of an unusual process if they were to walk in midway through a breathing session, or certainly a group. They might be, ready to get on the phone to the ambulance or something, worrying about what on earth are these crazy people doing.
Yeah.
But once you understand the process and you're part of the group or the session, and if you can surrender into it, then this cosmic soup that we can all kind of swim in really can do some remarkable things and generate experiences that, for me, are paradigm shattering. Well, certainly they were. I came from, as I was saying, a relatively straight
Yeah.
laced, standard issue. I wore a suit to work. Went to board meetings, took myself very seriously, and then suddenly I was opened up to different dimensions of reality that I never even knew existed. And so
Yeah.
that in itself was a process of integration for me of, if
Mm.
I was with a colleague of mine, we used to run a twice monthly breath group in Edinburgh. People ask me, what did you do last night? And, when I was at work the next morning, it's like, how do you explain to somebody,
Yeah. Yeah.
these magical experiences and
Yeah.
direct magic as well. It's direct magic and it's witnessed by
Yeah.
everybody there. And as we were saying earlier, like the synchronicities and the way things join up, and there's never any coincidence about who is at a breathing session or who's not at a breathing session. The
Mhm.
number of workshops that I've run that, someone will cancel with 15 minutes to go. They've got a flat tire and they've been waiting for 6 weeks to come along, and then the gods just don't want them there. It's not
Yeah.
their time. And so for
Yeah.
me, that's been part of my own journey of, coming from the corporate background, very structured, strategic, all these kinds of things, into no, the breath does what the breath does. And
Mm.
and it does it when it's good and ready, and it does it at exactly the right time.
Yeah.
And my journey has been learning to surrender into that and trust that
Yeah.
and know. Again, it's put a lot of my skills, a lot of the skills that I learned living abroad and all my breathwork experiences moving home through this period of time where things have been so uncertain, unsettled. It's actually been an opportunity to put everything that I've learned into practice, and
Yeah.
it's forced
Yeah.
me to, I have on Instagram, I have my daily, breathing practice reflections. I get down the beach every morning and I walk my talk because it's all I know how to do. It's and my life has
Yeah.
put me in a situation where it's taken me back to basics and I've just had to, you know, apply what I've learned and trust that it's going to unfold. And a lot of those spiritual skills they're difficult to explain to people, but once you've had the direct experience, once you have really felt the interconnection of all things, you have a knowing, and you build a strength of trust in how things are, knowing that they're going to unfold because we're not really in charge anyway, you know. And that for me is what's so exciting about breath work, is because it gives us this incredible tool to access that for ourselves. I don't have to explain anything to anyone after they've done a breathing session. Whether they can make sense of it or not is a whole nother question, but they know what it is because they've had direct experience of what they can do
Yeah.
just by connecting their own breath. People
Mm.
will experience that through different levels. Some people, it's a very physical experience. Some people are stuck in the mental and they're not interested in the spiritual.
Mm.
Other people go interdimensional in their first breathing session and have experiences that can literally
Yeah.
change the course of their life. So,
Yeah.
so my job as a facilitator is to hold a container and a space for that, for any of those possibilities to happen, and
Yeah.
and trusting, the bigger system of consciousness knows what it's doing, and we're accessing it with as much, you know care and love and respect and as humility as possible, because we know that it's ultimately not us doing it anyway. So,
Mm. There's something that keeps coming into my mind, and I think that it just feels like I need to discuss it here, because there's, like you said, breathwork is kind of center stage right now across,
mhm,
across the globe. And I have had my own experiences in group settings,
mhm,
and I've actually had clients that come back and they've had these experiences in breathwork sessions where they leave there feeling weird,
mhm,
off.
mhm,
Now, there's we can go down a rabbit hole for energetics,
mhm.
and understanding the dynamic of people releasing in such a big space, having all these people. But if it comes to like self-care and being mindful of these group sessions, can you give people like just a guide on how to, first of all, find the right facilitator,
Mm,
and also then when you're in those sessions, to even though you are releasing in that space with your breath, still containing, still holding your own energy, so that you don't end up picking up other people's stuff when you're there
sure, sure.
energetically. So I know this is a bit of a deeper question, but I
No,
think just it keeps coming up for me, so I think we need
yeah,
to
no,
dive
to be honest, I think it's an important one. It's an
yeah.
important one, and again, without diving too deep in it, my personal perspective, for whatever that's worth, my first counsel to anybody would be to trust your feelings.
Mm.
Don't do anything that you don't want to do.
Yes.
And that's again, that's different between, there's something that I've got to look at that I don't want to look at, and I
Yeah.
don't feel safe in this space, and this isn't the right space for me to be doing this depth of work.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges with breath work is, on one level, it's so simple. And a lot of people come into the field because they've had these extraordinary experiences, and they they're inspired, they're motivated, they want people to experience what they've experienced, and they come into it with a very positive intention. But as you say, we're working with very serious energy when it comes to breath work. We're dealing with things that, and again, I'll say, Hannah, I don't fully understand, and that's with 15 years of experience, because, as I say, we're dealing with the infinite. And my way of working with the breath, I'm trained through the Transformational Breath Foundation, which has its roots in, I guess you could say, the spiritual aspect of this work. And so I hold my sessions with that reverence and respect that comes from, holding and containing a space. And so my belief is that a breath worker's job is not just to take you somewhere you haven't been, but to be able to bring you back.
Mm.
And that's a subtle skill that not everybody necessarily can understand, and it's one of the challenges, because people can find themselves in big group situations, and suddenly
Yeah.
they're opening themselves up in ways that they feel vulnerable, they
Yeah.
don't necessarily
Yeah.
know how to handle. And so one of the tools that I share with people is, this is why we have the belly breath, because the belly breath is your anchor during the session. It's going to keep you grounded and present. And so even if you're feeling something that's really intense, the belly breath is actually going to help you through to the other side.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that the sessions themselves can't be overwhelming. They can't be, they're not full on or confronting,
Yeah.
these kinds of things. That is part of the process of breath work. But there's a difference between, if we lie down and connect our breath, something's going to happen,
Mm.
but it comes back to that, I guess you could say, doing your spiritual due diligence around, why am I engaging in this process? Because for me, breath work isn't about thrills, and it can definitely create thrilling experiences, and
Mm,
you can feel alive and vital in ways that are kind of difficult to put into language. But when
mm,
we're opening ourselves up psychologically, when we're working with the deeper aspects of what's going on in our own experience, for me, that's serious work that requires, you know, yes, taking it with a level of, treating this work with a level of respect, because it really
yeah,
can,
absolutely.
rattle your foundations. And
Yeah,
so for me, it would be, as I say, firstly, trust your feelings and trust yourself.
yeah,
But also, if you are learning to work with your breath, or you've been through a, difficult situation, not giving up and keeping looking for, if you feel that it's shifting something, but maybe not in the right way, there's a whole raft of breath work out there. So maybe it's
mm,
just something a little bit more gentle to help with the integration process,
mm,
or maybe it's, finding, somebody that you resonate with more. Um,
yeah,
I tend to limit my sessions, partly because there's only me here at the moment. I don't have a facilitation team in Australia just yet. But I tend to run smaller groups. I max at 12 people.
yeah,
Because my work involves hands-on touch, movement, sound, all these kinds of things. It's an integrated system.
mm,
But it's also, feeling, you've got to be containing the energy, and that's some of the more
yeah,
subtle stuff that you're referring to, is the
mm,
energetics of a room. When you're dealing with spiritual forces, who knows, right? Who knows? And
yeah,
and so, I work from the spiritual frame of, I'll open up a session with an invocation to ask for guidance, assistance, and support from, you know,
yeah,
spiritual forces. And then, at the end of the session, bring everybody back through a similar connection with these spiritual forces, because it's
mm,
learning to trust and work with those.
yeah,
And I position that with people at the beginning of sessions, that I hold things in a spiritual frame. I don't get too caught up with the language, because I don't want to overwhelm people. It's a pretty unusual
yeah,
process anyway.
myself, yeah,
But what I find is, if I have the courage to show up in my, I guess, my full spiritual self, if you can call it that, it's amazing the response and reaction you get from people, and they
mm,
relax at a much deeper level, and they can feel, they can feel your energy, they can feel the energy of the group. One of the things I often say to people is, like, one of my few rules is that I will never force anybody to breathe. That's a
yes,
that's a personal choice, and only you know where you're at in your own personal process. Only you know what's been going on for you in the course of your life, and it's not what breath work is about. And again, it can be. I think people can get caught up in their own enthusiasm and exhilaration for this work because of what they've experienced personally. But people can go through some really difficult things in life. As you were saying, this Earth training school, it's not for the faint of heart. And if
no,
someone's been, perhaps people are, I've had clients where they've uncovered sexual abuse during a session that they had long forgotten that was there. And so they've
yes,
come to see me because they've had exactly that experience of, I was in this group and the people didn't know what to do with me, and I was contorted, or I was feeling something, or I felt, you know, in those kinds of
yeah,
instances of deep violations of trust, we can be left feeling tremendously vulnerable. And so
yeah,
that becomes the dance between the breather and the facilitator, and learning to work, with deeper and deeper levels of safety and security with the person that you're working with. But ultimately, only you can be the judge of that, and that can be the trick. When you've got people
that,
who have been through these types of experiences, that's the very mechanism that's been damaged, their ability to trust. And so,
mm,
we're working with these really, really subtle states of experience, and then creating, an environment where people feel safe enough to go there.
yeah,
And,
so,
I'm a big one on aftercare. At the end of my sessions, people have my number, they
yes,
have my details. If any, I
yes, there you
always
go,
say, if anything comes up, don't suffer in silence. Come and speak to me about it. I often joke that my remedy will usually include more breathing. But part of the structure of the sessions, as I say, is to open people up, to help them experience that intensity, but then to bring them back. And
yeah,
it's the bringing them back, which is really the art form, because, as you
mm,
say, people they can find themselves discombobulated, especially if they've not experienced anything like this before.
yeah. It's like yes to everything that you said, and I am so happy that you said the aftercare, right? That people know that they can reach out to you, because I have had so many clients come through to me saying that they went on these experiences in these massive groups, And when, they have these huge shifts and they're actually cracked open and they leave there feeling so disconnected and so like, what just happened and where's this coming from? And then they left with no support. So
Yes.
guys, first of all, awareness, like you said, trust your feelings, trust it. If you are excited to go to a session, you get there, you put your yoga mat down, you sit down, the facilitator starts talking, and all of a sudden you start feeling that you just like don't want to be here. Okay. You need to check in. It could be one of two things. It's either the self-sabotage, right? It's like going, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. Or there's really something off in the energy. So you really need to, this is why awareness is so important. You've got to
Yes.
check in and you've got to ask yourself, where is this coming from? Then
Yes.
if you think it's self-sabotage, then start the breathing. But when you are in the breathing and, the facilitator does or says something that doesn't feel all right, you can get up and you can walk out
Mhm.
quietly so that you don't distract the other people. But if every part of you says no, then you get up and you walk out. Nobody can stop you from doing that, right? So have the awareness, but then also, even before you get there, ask the question. Say, if I come to your sessions, if I need your help, will you be available to support me afterwards? What have you got available? How can you support me? Because if you're going to go to a breathwork session and they don't have aftercare or they don't have the option for you to call them to speak to them about stuff that's happened in that session with them,
Yeah.
I would think twice.
Yeah. Yeah, you can be you can be exposing yourself. That's one of the challenges with breath work, and to run with it, it's a little bit of a niggle of mine is, is social media, and people putting breathing sessions online. People have seen people in deep catharsis or, these contorted states, as I was saying, they have strong tetany.
I don't like those
And
posts.
my personal belief is that cameras have no place in breathing sessions because it's not
Yes,
what it's
I
about.
agree.
It's not what it's about. And if someone is taking photos, then that reframes the whole interaction.
Mm.
And it's not, and again, like I was saying, it's not about chasing thrills, because anyone who's been through any serious catharsis will know, or will be able to tell you, it can be really scary. It can be really challenging. I get to witness human bravery that makes me cry. That's
Yeah.
how incredible this work is. The courage that people demonstrate to lie down, stay with their breathing, and continue to breathe even when the going gets rough. It gives
Mm.
me hope for humanity, because it's the most remarkable thing to witness. But it's nobody else's business, and
Yeah.
it's not. And there's a sacred component to this work which I feel very strongly about. I do my best to embody it. At the same time, it's not my place to criticize or judge anybody else. People have to make up their own minds, and they share this at the level they want to share it.
Yeah.
But people, if they're honest, they can feel it. They can feel it, and the yeah, it's serious work. I don't want to be too much of
It
a
is.
downer, but
Yeah.
to open the lid and to really go inside, and as I was saying with previous experiences, people can uncover things they don't even know are there.
Yeah.
They've shut it out of their experience. And if people have had the misfortune of having a traumatic childhood, or having something, as I say, a deep violation of trust, or something, very difficult happen, then, we're
Yeah.
working with all sorts of complexes that exist beneath the surface. And so we've got to be respectful and gentle with that. That
Yeah.
said, my experience comes from learning to trust the breath, and learning to trust in the totality of the human experience, and to trust that we always are exactly where we need to be. And so if those experiences do arise, they're meant to arise, and we learn to
Mm.
work with them, and we work from wherever we are at. And and
Okay.
uh, and the breath, has this amazing ability to be able to, heal us and show us things. Without going too much into it, I can remember, the story I often share. One of the things that I uncovered early in my early days of breath work is I was in a car accident when I was about 18 months old.
All right.
And the car, there was a mechanical failure in the car. The car ran off the road, and the tree hit the side of the car next to my baby seat. And it smashed out my front teeth as a baby. And I was knocked
Oh,
out.
wow.
I was unconscious and bleeding from my face, these kinds of things. And anyway, I had a lot of reconstructive surgery as a child for my front teeth, and I had caps and drilling and all the things going on. And
Wow.
I can remember one of my very early experiences was I had my colleague came up, and during the session she put a hand on my knee, and I started to scream. I just started
Yeah.
like, and this primal scream came out of, and I had no idea where it came from. I had no idea what it was connected to. And it was only a couple of days later that the memory surfaced, and it was me sitting in the dentist chair. And then when I would flinch, when the dentist did something, my mum was there and she would squeeze my knee to let me know that I was okay. And so I had
Yeah.
all this dental trauma wired into me, wired into the way that I related to the world, my judgments that I'd made about my relationship with my mom, and having to be strong even when I'm in pain, all these kinds of things, all these deep, intense
Yeah.
complexes. And I had absolutely no idea that they were there. No
Yes.
idea at all. I have no memory of the car accident other than what people have told me. I have very little memory of, the childhood experiences. But the body keeps the score and the body remembers.
Oh, yes.
And so
Yeah.
even someone who was very experienced with breath work at the time, it was another layer that came up that, that I had no idea what to do with. But at the same time, the breath helped me deal with the complexity of that experience. I didn't have to psychoanalyze it. I didn't have to talk about it to anybody of, oh yeah, it was really painful. I was 4 years old and I used to, it doesn't fix the problem. The breath
Mm.
has the ability to help us go where we need to go, but it's kind of a co-creation or a co-creative process to go
Yeah.
when we're ready. And and
Yeah.
uh, and that for me that's the boundary of every single sovereign human being has the right to make that decision as to when they're ready and when they're not. And as
Yeah.
well-meaning or otherwise as people might be, you don't know somebody any more than they know themselves,
Yeah.
and so we're in this territory. We've got to be incredibly respectful, but at the same time, we have the spiritual skills and this wider, how can you say, consciousness expanding capacity that can then help us connect things up in ways that we could have never imagined or perceived. So healing is
Yeah.
absolutely possible, but timing in many ways is everything too, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It is. It's there's also a like this spiritual journey and this uncovering and learning and peeling back things, right? There's also the flip side to, when you do go to, let's say, a session in a large group and you do have a, let's call it a bad experience.
Mm,
There's also that experience needed to happen in order for
mm,
you to be able to then find the healing within that, or set a healthy boundary from that, or there's a learning within that bad experience. So just awareness, right? If you've
yeah,
been in that experience, then just go inside and go, how was this for me? How
yes,
did this happen for my healing? And
yes.
then sit with that, right? So, and also, there are times that, yeah, there's so we can go so
It's a
deep with
big
this
topic.
topic. Like, it's a very big
Yeah,
topic. Just guys, just have your awareness
yeah.
when you are going to those sessions. Do, due diligence, right? Just do the
And,
work,
and
ask
to
the
be honest,
questions before.
I'm really grateful you asked the question, because it's such a fundamental part of our practice. And I've spoken with a number of very experienced practitioners, and it can sometimes, as I say, be their bugbear, because people get the bug. It's the next big thing. They're enthusiastic. They're fired up. Their motivation is genuine, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And
Yeah.
and the shadow side for me is it can put people off breath work. It can be overwhelming for them, and and sometimes, exactly the same. Maybe it's not the right thing for everybody. I'm not an evangelical when it comes to this, that everybody should do it. Not everybody is wired the same way. It's
No,
not what everybody is seeking, and same with spirituality, right? It's not. I had to learn it's not everybody's path. It's not what everybody seeks this time round, and
no.
so it's
And to be 100% transparent here, and so that the audience can also, it will just make sense for them, is that I joined a couple of breathwork, maybe two, maybe three breathwork sessions in large groups.
mm,
One of them I walked out.
mm,
I was like, this is not the right place for me. And
mm,
I honored my spirit, and I got up and I walked out. And the other two sessions, I think it was, I experienced it halfway through both of those. I kind of stopped breathing and just closed my energy, because there was
mm,
way too much happening in the room for my energy.
mm,
And I do not feel drawn to do group sessions. If I do
mm,
breath work, it's one-on-one or it's by
mm,
myself.
mm,
So take it from my own experience. Like,
mm,
I have tried it in groups.
Mm.
but I do not find value in doing large group breathwork
Yeah.
sessions. I will rather do it one-on-one and with the facilitator, or I
Yeah.
do it at home with and for myself. So find what works for you. Some people love big groups. Some people
Yes.
love that experience of being in the community and experiencing that big energy. But if you're not one of those people, there's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with you.
100%.
Do what is
100%.
right for you. Yeah,
100%.
honor yourself.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why I offer both services, to be perfectly honest, because people
Yeah.
are drawn to different things. And I've had a number of clients come along on just for a one-to-one to get familiar with the practice and, to experience that initial intensity. And then they come along to the groups because they're able to, they understand the process in a different way, and they're in a different place where it really works for them. Other
And there's
people,
also,
they love the group dynamic, and they
yeah.
take a lot from it, and one-to-ones aren't for them. It comes back to this whole premise of breathwork, right? It's your breath and it's your choice, and no one else gets to tell you what to do with it. And
No.
for me, that's the most, one of the most exciting things, because, and even when it comes to, I was saying about Instagram and people having these big, catharses or whatever, I've seen just as massive shifts happen in people when you can't tell that anything's going on from outside of them.
Oh, oh yes.
You got
They're like, looks like nothing is happening, and
nothing's
then they
happening,
come
and
out and it's like
they've had the
they
most
have
profound
had
experience of their life.
life-changing
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is part of it. Of, I'm reminded, I had an old NLP trainer, and I remember him saying, he said, "Who is this about?" That was his line. "Who is this about?" And I think that's the ultimate reminder for anyone who is in the healing arts, and who is teaching this kind of work, of never forget who this is about. Because again, in breath work, you can be the star of the show, and I have people say that, he's a really amazing person, and he's this, that, the other, and it's all very nice to hear. And I sometimes think, if only they knew the truth and what it took to get here. But really, it comes down to, it's always about them. It's about their experience. It's not about me. I'm not doing the breathing. I'm creating a space for something to happen that I was lucky enough to run into and encounter. And in many ways, I see my work as an unrepayable debt to the people that came before me, because
Yeah.
they were selfless enough and kind enough and caring enough and compassionate enough. I had people that were willing to hold me when I was crying. It was all too much and the pain was too strong, and to hold me without judgment, and to not, you know, for me to feel safe and secure, and as a guy uncovering emotional depths that I wish weren't there, but that's what I attempt to bring, that same selflessness and that same, loving intent that I was so lucky to encounter at a crisis point in my own life.
Yeah.
And that's where the real reward comes for me in this work, is those moments when people, they get it and they understand why I do what I do, and they understand what potential exists for them. And that's what I'm really hoping to do, is, ultimately be creating a community environment where people, can access, the power of the breath on a regular basis. And then we can all go on the journey together, because I think, that's it's what the world needs, right? It needs more conscious, aware people understanding themselves first and foremost, but then being able to, put themselves out there in a way that is non-confrontational and empowering for others. And I often say that in my trainings of, everything I do is about empowering people, giving their breath back to them, and like you were saying, giving them, this is your tool, and it's going to be with you all the time, regardless of what's going on in your life. If you have the capacity to stop and become aware of how you're breathing, then that's the first step to mastery, in my opinion, because it
Absolutely.
takes us out of emotional reactivity, puts us into a place of being able to respond, and the knock-on effects in our life. That it completely changes how people then interact with you, because they're not able to feed off the same emotional charges, because you've been able to clear out what's going on inside of you. So it can really, heighten our life experience in you know
So many ways.
yeah, and in an innumerable number of ways. So
Yeah, absolutely. Russell, I am mindful of the time, but I want to ask maybe, so let's say somebody is in a stressful job, okay, considering that's where you come from. You come from the whole
yeah,
left brain, male dominated world. Let's say somebody's got a really stressful job and they are on the run all the time. What is one small breath work exercise that they can do for themselves at their desk where nobody's even noticing that's going to
Mm.
help them just come back into their body?
So balancing is easy way. So I would suggest to people, it's what's actually called it's called heart coherence breathing,
Yeah.
but it's breathing in for 5 and out for 5, and that's it. And a way we can do it is we can, you can put a little timer on your phone if you're that way inclined. But people don't even have to know that you're doing it. If you're sitting at your desk pretending to work, you can be working with
Yeah.
your breathing and nobody has to know. And so if
Yeah.
someone's, if I would be asking the question, if someone's operating at full tilt all the time, there's probably other things going on behind the scenes. But we
Yeah.
also live busy lives.
Yeah.
And so having, the heart coherence or the balancing breath of just breathing in for 5 and out for 5 is actually going to bring you in alignment with the natural rhythm of your own heartbeat. And it
Yeah.
works with improving your heart coherence, which is essentially, it's the variability of the gaps between your heartbeats. And the more variability we have, actually, the more healthy we are, because it means that we're able to respond exactly as I was saying. We're coming from a place of responding rather than instinctively reacting. And so
Reacting.
if someone's living a busy life and they're moving at 100 miles an hour, quite often we can be in this very reactive way, which isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's what needed. If you've got a position of high responsibility and leadership, you are going to be reacting to what's thrown up at you. But it's prioritizing your own nervous system regulation and your own emotional state, and making that a priority in your life. But I can assure people, even if you did that exercise as a challenge for the next 5 days, at the same time each day, you stopped and breathed in for 5 and out for 5 minutes, you'll start to notice a change.
Yeah.
And then you can increase that practice if you want. You can always take yourself away to the bathroom and just breathe in for 5, out for 5. It's going to get you
Yeah.
back into this more coherent state of mind. So
Yeah. Beautiful.
yeah,
That's powerful. Thank you very much. And I know that most people have a lunch break. So take five
yeah,
minutes from your lunch break and do it,
exactly.
and you'll definitely feel the benefits.
Yeah,
Um,
just as a side one, and I am conscious, I'm aware of time too, but
that's all right.
the and maybe a topic people will think is, for a breath worker, talking about people smoking. I've heard a number of smokers actually say to me, it's not the cigarette, it's their chance to get out and breathe consciously. It's actually the breathing in, because they're breathing slowly.
It's those
You know,
long drawings, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And obviously there's complexity with chemicals and things that are going into your body. But it's a similar principle. People going out for a cigarette break is often, they'll do it to break the emotional tension. That can be the root
Yeah.
of the habit itself. But if we can harness habits like that, suboptimal habits, let's say, you can, rewire that as a positive habit of, I'm going to take myself out of the situation for 5 minutes like I would for a cigarette break, and I just breathe consciously for a few minutes. And I feel different in the same way that I would had I had a hit of nicotine or whatever it is that I get from smoking.
Yeah.
So there are ways of integrating this into our lives that can be very subtle. And as I say, the powerful thing is nobody else has to know. Nobody has to know.
No,
It's your relationship
no.
with your breath is your own business. But
Yeah.
but I can assure you, if you start upon the journey, it's certainly been the adventure of my life. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, Russell, thank you so much for spending the time with us this morning and sharing your knowledge, your wisdom. And I am honestly looking forward to having you in Sacred Healing with us, and bringing all this magic together. Like we said earlier on, it's the people that I've brought together is, the breath work, it's you, and it's the nervous system regulation and
mm,
the inner child work, and then learning more about yourself with the human design. And I brought
mm,
them together specifically because I know those are tools that are going to bring a lot of awareness to who
yes,
we are. And then it would just make life better and easier
yeah,
for you. So
100%.
can't
I
wait to have,
I'd go a step further, Leonie, in saying you're giving people skills, practical skills to navigate life. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like
that's
the
beautiful.
complexity of the modern world is rapidly increasing, and what would have previously been as spiritually stuff, like the inner child work is just it's so profound and can fundamentally change how you interact with the world if you're able to work with those sensitive inner parts, and things like human design, other skills for being able to figure out your place in the world.
Yeah,
I think that
understanding who you are.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
becoming less, oh, I'm doing this, because I'm into it, and it becomes the necessary skills for functioning, I think. So
Yeah, it is. It's really something that we should be teaching kids from a young age
agree.
to kind of navigate their own stuff, right? When you were talking earlier about your experience as a child, the car accident, I was reminded of my own experience, and for the longest time, I forgot about. I mean, I didn't even bring it together like as trauma. But I was playing with my cousins. We were running around the swimming pool, and I jumped into the pool and I grabbed the side and I hit my head. So I had this big gash here. So they had to race me to the hospital, to the doctors, to have stitches done. As a child, I didn't love needles and obviously stitches, and they literally had, I think it was my mum and dad, and I think maybe 2 or 3 nurses and people were literally holding my body down so that they can get the needle in so that they can do the stitches. And I can feel emotions coming up. That in itself caused massive trauma in my body. And it's only years later that I realized that was a really traumatic experience for me, and I had to work through it. But that's the inner child work. That is like going back and then working on those things, right? So when I really appreciate you saying that I'm giving them the tools. I really am feeling like I really want to give people the tools so that they can support themselves, because when you have these tools, nobody can take it away from you.
Yeah.
And then you can help yourself. And it's not all doom and gloom, right? It is beautiful in the process as well, because when you do have that experience of release, it's the most beautiful experience ever. So thank you so much for your time today.
pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Look forward to having you on board in Sacred Healing. Guys, if you haven't registered yet, the link will be in the show notes. Go and register. I'm also going to have Russell's details, his website, Instagram, whatever he gives me. I'm going to put it in the show notes as well, so that you can reach out to him if you feel like you would like to reach out to him. And then I've got one last question for you, Russell. If everything was taken away from you and you only had one awareness or one gift that you could give to the world, what would that awareness be? What would you, wisdom, if you want to call it that, what would you impart to the world?
It can only be the awareness of our breath.
Yeah.
Because that's where it all starts. And in many ways, that's the practice. The practice is, being aware of this foundational, life-giving mechanism that happens all the time. And the shift starts when we become aware of that. And it's a beautiful rabbit hole to explore. And it's, as I say, it's taken me on the journey of my life. And that's what inspires me is just seeing those moments where people, and they realize how much they can do for themselves. And I really think it's if I could give one gift to the world, that would be it, as a legacy, and that people realize how much power exists inside themselves and within, just from becoming aware of and then changing how they breathe. So
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you,
again.
mate.
Thank you guys for joining us on today's episode. If you haven't subscribed and you haven't shared it with family and friends yet, please do that, because it's going to help us reach more people. And you guys know that the more people we reach with awareness and with breath work and everything else, the more we can change the world, right? But it starts with us. If we can start changing ourselves and we can start practicing the tools and the awareness within ourselves, the flow-on effect is the change in the world. So thank you for joining us today, and we will see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me on the Spiritual AI podcast. Don't forget to rate and share the show with your friends. It will only take a few seconds. So go ahead, go and rate the show, share it with a friend, spread the message of the power that we hold within each one of us, our awareness and our intuition. Let's create a revolution. Let's change the world. I'll see you next time.